Hi everyone, it's Rudy and Aaron, and it's Tuesday, May 7th, 2019. We just watched the Sandra Bland movie on YouTube, and I noticed today in the New York newspapers they've released the recording from her cell phone the day she was arrested for failing to signal, dragged out of her car, tased, I think, and
Well, I think he threatened to tase her.
thrown down on the ground and
Abused and assaulted.
abused and assaulted her on the side of the road, threw her in jail cell for 3 days, and she allegedly hung herself with a plastic garbage bag that wasn't supposed to be in the cell. And there's no DNA on the bag, which is very curious. But she was a Black Lives Matter activist who didn't deserve to die and didn't deserve to be pulled over and ripped out of her vehicle. And it's enough to give anyone watching PTSD, and we don't appreciate police officers acting in this manner at all.
Yeah. Encenia, which is the police officer that pulled her over that day, was filled with the spirit of Satan. I mean, he's just an absolute devil, and he should have never been allowed to be a police officer. There is a book called Rise of the Warrior Cop, the militarization of America's police forces. And I'll just say this, and I know that it may be a controversial statement, but I do have a lot of admiration for some of the points of Black Lives Matter regarding the points they make about the prison industrial complex, the fact that black people are abused and mistreated by law enforcement. But because I run a prison ministry and because I advocate for unjustly incarcerated people, I see a lot of white people that also get mistreated and abused and unjustly incarcerated and tortured and even killed. Sandra Bland's case reminds me a lot of Justin Thau. He was supposedly committed suicide in an Oklahoma prison, and his family does not believe it, which is very similar to Sandra Bland. You can type in on your search engine, Justice for Justin, and there's a GoFundMe page where you can read about Justin Thau. There's also story after story where men... if you guys remember the story where a guy found a dog and he tried to return it to the pound, he ends up getting shot in front of his children. That was a white man, right? And so when I speak about the injustice of the law enforcement officials and how we have a militarization in America and a rise of a police state, I say that we need to fight injustice, and then there's a period after that. Whereas Black Lives Matter and even Sandra herself says she wants to fight injustice against blacks. Why does she have to say that? I understand there is a national attention that's brought every time we have a huge injustice against black people, and it seems like they want to create a divisiveness by putting that on the news over and over again. But from my perspective, I see it against blacks and white, and we need to stand up together and speak against it. My wife said that she might have an opinion on why black people seem to get more attention in the news media than, say, when a white person is murdered by law enforcement.
It's George Soros funding division, distraction, and he's trying to distract us from the real tyrants in this country.
Yeah, and it's very emotional to watch a video and to see our paid, law enforcement peace officers committing these atrocities and, murdering people and abusing people. It's very emotional. But if they play those videos only for black examples and we never see any for white examples, it can tend to create a divisiveness. And that's why you see Black Lives Matter with all these protests in Chicago and New York. But I could give you just as many examples with white men that don't seem to get a lot of attention. The other thing that I'll say is at the end of the documentary, it was 1 hour and 41 minutes, I believe, they put some music at the grave of Sandra Bland, and then the sisters are seen dancing. That reminded me of Darlie Routier and her Silly String episode. If you guys remember, Darlie Routier was convicted because they said that she had odd behavior by the graveside. People act differently at during the mourning period and at the grave. So don't ever take someone's demeanor at the grave to deduce, if they, whether they're mourning or not. People deal with that differently, and it doesn't surprise me. Anyway, I recommend you watch the documentary. It's called Say Her Name, Sandra Bland. And I believe it in the course of the documentary, they said 841 people, I could be wrong, but that's what I recall, have died in custody since she was found dead. And there should be 841 documentaries. Right? We got a massive problem with our criminal justice system and a rise of a police state. And it needs to be addressed not as a black issue, but as an issue for our entire society.
Yes, and her final message was to end racism. So blacks and whites really do need to unite together, and that will strike fear into the hearts of these devils.
That's true. She was working to unite people. And I believe if blacks and whites could come together and say, we both agree that our peace officers should not be abusing, torturing, murdering, and unjustly incarcerating us, we can make some headway. But if we allow this to become a racial issue, one thing I will say about white people is we do a terrible job at standing up against the establishment when a white person is murdered or unjustly incarcerated. Black people seem to do a whole lot better, but my wife seems to think that they are funded by George Soros in order to cause racial division. That could be true. Anyway, that's all I got. Take care. God bless.